Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our local pension board meeting on the 17th of April. This meeting is taking place virtually with members of the board, along with officers presenting reports joining online. Can I please ask that all members and officers have their microphone on mute until they wish or are invited to speak? If you are on speaking, please also turn on your video. Today we have received apologies from Councillor Cutkelvin, and we are going to go to the first item on our agenda. And the first item are the minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of February 1924. I propose the minutes of the previous meeting are taken as read, confirmed and signed. Is that agreed, or do we have any comments?
Agreed.
Yes, thank you, Manjit. That is agreed, and there are no comments. I see no hands appearing anywhere. So the next item on our agenda is question time, and I have received no questions. Item number 3 on our agenda, to advise of any other items which the chairman has decided as urgent elsewhere on the agenda. And I can report there are no urgent items. Item 4 on our agenda, declaration of interest in respect of items on the agenda. Is there anything anybody wishes to declare? Except for the usual standard ones, and there isn't. No hands showing on my screen. Thank you very much. And that brings me to the first item and on today's agenda, and that is the LGPS Central Update, which will be presented by our Senior Finance Analyst, Bulish, and it is on pages 11 to 16 on your agenda. Over to you, Bulish, and good morning.
Morning, Mrs. Chair, Ms. Page and the board. So we get this update once a year, generally for our pooling company. So the purpose is on point 1, obviously. The recent joint committee meetings held in July last year, 2023, and February 24, so we'll have a little update on that. And the outcome of the AGM, which was held in September 2023, and a CEO appointment for LGPS Central. Our funds pooling progress with respect to our investments in LGPS Central products. And then finally, our funds listed equity exposure to the United Kingdom, although this part isn't entirely LGPS Central related. Moving on to some of the background, just for some of our newer members here, LGPS Central has been in operation since April 2018. The fund is a stakeholder from 2 different perspectives. So we are a co-owner of the firm, LGPS Central, so we are an equal 1/8 owner. We've got 7 other local authorities, and we are also a recipient of investment services. So we buy investment products from them, just like any of the other 20 or so managers the fund buys investment products from. The only difference here is that we work with LGPS Central to create the products alongside the 8 other partner funds. And just so we know, the other partner funds are Nottinghamshire, Derbyshire, Staffordshire, West Midlands, Shropshire, Worcestershire, Cheshire, and ourselves, Leicestershire. The diagram at point 6 just shows how these interests are managed through the shareholders forum and the joint committee, and we'll just talk about those 2 bodies in a moment. If anybody is looking at that diagram there, the only obvious acronym that you may not be aware of is the one in the bottom right, ORCA, which is Central's Operations, Risk Control and Admin Committee. Coming back to the joint committee, this deals with the investor functions. The JC meets twice a year. It's comprised of 8 members representing each of our partner funds. The supervisory body is The Shareholders Forum focuses on shareholder issues. It includes representatives from each of the 8 pension funds. The members are usually elected representatives, typically the chairs of the committees, but it's not always the case. But for our fund, it is Councillor Barclay, the chair of the Leicestershire Pension Committee. The forum meets at least twice a year to agree certain reserve matters. We've got a number of bullet points there that kind of show the kind of powers that they have, so such as amending and adopting new strategic plans, appointment and removal of directors, etc. Final bit of background there at point 12 is, as at the end of December, the total assets under management by LGPS Central was over 21 billion, and that's spread over 24 investment products covering things like passive and active equity, private equity funds, fixed income funds, property, infrastructure and private credit, and as a pool of 8 local authority pension funds. Some have pooled more than others for a variety of reasons. Good point to ask for any questions at that point before we move on to the meetings that had occurred.
Yes, Bhulesh, on point 3, it states it was agreed that the chairman of the local pension committee should act as the fund's representative on the shareholders forum and joint committee. Can you elaborate a little bit on that, please?
I will. Yes, it's covered in the later parts, but we rotate the chair, and it's Councillor Barclay's turn in the seat, and he was appointed recently, I think, at the last JC. So we'll come on to that in a moment as well. It's one of the points later in the paper. At the Joint Committee on the 21st of July, so this is last year, there were a number of reports. They're fairly standard in nature. The updates are included in the bullet points below. I won't read them all out, but I can obviously elaborate if needed. There's 4 bullet points there which were covered. And we had a further joint committee to update on here. This was at the 2nd of February. This was the meeting where our chair was appointed. Our local pension committee chair was appointed as chair of the joint committee. A number of reports again are noted below and listed. Again, I won't read them all out. Again, fairly standard in nature. We have one more joint committee to chair, and that will be on the 18th of October. We are also hosting at County Hall, so please attend if you are interested in pooling investor-related matters. The next section here is the outcomes from the September 2024 AGM and the CEO appointment. So an annual general meeting was held in September 2023. There are a number of items for shareholder approval which were agreed by shareholders as listed below. All were approved. That is the adoption of the annual company report and accounts, the reappointment of the external auditor for LGPS Central, the authorisation of the board to agree the external auditor's remuneration, approval to extend the term of office of the current board chair by 18 months, that's Joanne Sagers, and then the last point there is re-election to the board of Joanne Sagers, who is the chair, Susan Martin, Ian, Kieran and Belinda are the non-executive directors, and John Burns is the interim CEO. And the last bit of news there from that meeting was following the departure of Central CEO last year in May, John Burns, who was the deputy CEO, has been acting as the interim CEO whilst the board were recruiting to that substantive position. And the recruitment process is complete now, and they've appointed Mr. Richard Law-Deeks as the new CEO. We expect him to start in summer, pending any regulatory approvals. So where are we now in terms of pooling? That's covered in points 18 to 22, and how we view Central as our pooling partner. So 18 really emphasises the fact that whenever the fund has an investment need, our first port of call is the pool. Where an existing asset or investment exists. If it doesn't and there isn't enough desire from the other partner funds, then we go outside of the pool. But for us, it's been the first port of call. As at December, our own fund, that's the Leicestershire County Council Pension Fund, was valued at nearly 6.1 billion. Legal and General are an external manager, so they're not a pooled manager. They are one of our bigger managers, but it was a collectively procured investment product, i.e. it commenced prior to pooling, but it was that deal was procured with 7 other local authorities. So in some ways, we class that as a pooled product. We have 983 million invested with them, which is about 16% of the fund's total value. The fund's single largest manager is LGPS Central, and we have another 2.3 billion, or 38% invested with them. And the reason I put those two together is we like to call both of those as pooled. And one of the benefits of pooling is the lower fees, and that's what we do have from the LGIM products. So taken together, the Central and the LGIM products together, we have about 3.3 billion pooled, which is about 54% of total fund assets. The fund has plans to invest with Central, illustrated by the fact that investment commitments made to Central, which are still yet to be called, total about 385 million, or another 6% on top of the 54. In addition, we have planned to invest further monies with LGPS Central through 2024, which should increase the proportion of pooled investments further. The final section there, starting at point 23, talks about the fund's UK exposure, and we've looked at listed equity in this point here, and you can see a little table towards the bottom of that point there, which breaks out our AUM, which is assets under management, which are within the UK. We've got 5 products there. 3 are within LGIM, so that's Legal and General, and 2 are from LGPS Central. Taken together, that's 231 million, which is our exposure to the UK, which is about 9.3% of our total fund. And why that's important is the fact that the UK represents only around 3% of world equity indices. So we are, about 2.7 times higher than that already. There's a lot of talk around investing in the UK and locally, and that's why we brought this up at this point. The last point there is the fund will look to capture its UK exposure from other asset classes as well, such as private equity and infrastructure, once we've talked to all our managers, and we will report on that as required with government guidance. That's the end of what I wanted to say, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Bhulesh, and very comprehensive and very interesting report as per usual. It is for us to note and to raise some questions, and it's over to Councillor Shepherd. Richard, over to you for your question.
Thank you. On those last paragraphs, 224, is our being overweight in the UK, although it is obviously, as I understand it, in keeping with the government's requests or guidance, is it actually being done to the detriment of the pension fund's value? In other words, if there weren't that government guidance, would we not be overweight in the UK?
Very good question. So we take advice on our strategic allocation every year. Hymans Robertson are the fund's investment advisor. Our UK exposure had been a lot higher. We go back 3-4 years. We have trimmed it, and we have had a listed equity review completed by Hymans last year. The number that we're at is a number that's been advised with Hymans and approved by the local pension committee. I don't think we're in a position to say that government guidance should push us one way or the other. Our fiduciary duty is to produce the best returns, risk adjusted, for our pensioners and members.
Thank you. May I come back, Madam Chairman? I'm glad to hear you say, Bhulesh, we don't think the government guidance should push us one way or the other, although the government guidance is there, and it may become, I suppose, a formal requirement. But yes, clearly we need to make sure we're investing in the best possible way for the pension fund's value. So thank you for that clarification.
Yes, and it does look extremely healthy, doesn't it? Questions? Any others? There are no other questions, Bhulesh. I thank you very much for your presentation. Can I assume that this report is duly noted? And Yes, I
Yes,
assume so.
Yes.
And we are now going over to agenda item 6, and that is the Pension Fund Administration Report, January to March 2024. And that's our Pensions Project Manager, Stuart Wells, who will be presenting it. And the appendix on this is on page 35 to 42. And there is a recommendation on page 32. Over to you, Stuart, and good morning.
Good morning. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, this is the Pension Fund Administration report that covers January to March, quarter 4 of 23-24. It's relatively lengthy, so I will try and pick out the key points, but obviously any questions covering any of the content are welcome. To start with the performance indicators, data is included in the appendix, not just for the final quarter of 23-24, but there's data there in respect of the whole year as well. And whilst our KPIs have fallen since November in the implementation of McCloud, over the full year they have been generally static or close to target when compared to the previous year. Moving on to service delivery and general workloads, the tables shown on page 19 and 20 show the volumes in each area during January to March. And I just wanted to acknowledge the two areas rated red, preserve benefits and aggregations. They are a little lower. The completed cases are a little lower than we would like, and we are now focusing on these areas as part of our early valuation preparations. To assist in these areas, more officers have been trained on the processing of these cases, which will help to address the situation going forward. I just wanted to move on to page 21 and the pensions increase exercise. So this is the annual exercise to uprate everyone's pensions in line with CPI, and that's nearing completion. There have been more issues than we would have liked this year, and we're working our way through those. Some of these issues were highlighted by the system provider Hayward, and some of them were spotted by us. And together we are addressing those and dealing with those the best we can. The issue that is mentioned in the report talks about where some members will not get their full increase in April. So just to add to that, we estimate that this will affect around 750 members, and these members are entitled to a minor increase that covers the first 7 days of the month before the main increase kicks in on the 8th of April. And for these members, that slight increase has not been applied. Haywards are working on a solution and will provide a fix, and which we will implement as soon as we can. We have taken a look at some of these cases that are affected by this, and typically the increase amounts to less than a £5 in terms of the underpayment. So these members will continue to get their full increase that applies from the 8th of April. But these members who are entitled to a minor increase between the 1st and the 7th of April for technical reasons, it is less than a £5, but nevertheless, we will be sorting it out once the dust has settled and Haywards have implemented the fix. We will implement it, and then we'll write to the members and resolve this. And once the whole pensions increase exercise has finished, we will be speaking with Haywards again to express our dissatisfaction with how the system has performed this year, and look for reassurances that improvements will be in place for next time. Informally, we have already raised our concern and dissatisfaction, and there's been acknowledgements that the system hasn't been up to scratch, and they do have ideas how to improve things for next time. So we'll obviously keep the board reported on these developments. Just wanted to move on to McCloud. So we're fully now into the business as usual stage with the McCloud exercise. So we're dealing with cases as people retire, as people transfer. The element related to McCloud is taken into account. And in parallel, the work continues on updating service data on member records, which has been going on for some time. We've now received guidance explaining how to calculate transfers for cases affected by McCloud. And these changes to the transfer process do add an extra layer of complexity to the calculations. And the systems, unfortunately, have not yet been updated with these changes, which means that manual work is required to calculate these cases. In addition to transfers, I wanted to inform you that the number of deceased members affected by McCloud that we've come across is increasing recently. Where these members are in scope, we need to assess whether they're entitled to, whether they were entitled to additional pension benefits at the point of retirement, and this then impacts on the level of widows' benefits that would have been payable as well. So where they are impacted by McCloud and an additional pension was due, then the original calculation needs to be rerun so that A, we can sort out any arrears that would now be owing to the estate, and B, it would also have an impact on the survivors' benefits. I think in summary that the McCloud remedy is affecting many areas of our administration, and it's taking longer to do most things. And this is impacting on performance indicators. Pension dashboards. We have now signed a contract with Haywards, our system suppliers, for an integrated service provider. And this provides the link between our pension data and the dashboard. So obviously this is a key piece of kit, and that's now in place. The AVC framework, the process is now at the final stage, and this AVC provider framework is expected to go live for funds to use in the first quarter of this year. And then once we've got this in place, then we will be looking to utilise the framework ourselves later in this year. So moving on to year-end preparation on page 25. So work is nearing the end on updating the records for members of the schools and academies that have moved away from East Midlands Shared Services, who were their payroll providers, to other payroll providers. So we've had to update the records to reflect this. Now that those records have been updated, the focus then switches to processing the monthly pay data that we submit. All employers are required to submit through iConnect, and this needs to be done in time for year end. So that the two main providers that have taken on the schools are Dataplan and Iris. Iris are on track with their monthly submissions. Dataplan are further behind, and we have provided data up to August, and we are working on the data for September and October. There are 19 schools or academies that are affected by this, and there is definitely a risk that the year-end data work ultimately the production of annual benefit statements could be late if we don't get all this data resolved. And we'll provide an update on this at the next meeting. Audits. There's been 2 audits reports received in the quarter. We received beg your pardon. We received the audit in respect of McLeod, which received assurances from the report, and no recommendations were made. There will be a follow-on internal audit on McLeod in early 25-26, and we'll deal with that. That should coincide with the point where the hours that we've been updating will have been completed. In addition to that, we've had a report on the overseas life certificates, and again we've had substantial assurance for that. There were some recommendations that the fund officers we've agreed to, and we'll be putting those in place during this quarter. The Code of Practice. So the Code of Practice came into effect on the 27th of March, and we have acquired a gap analysis tool that will allow us to assess exactly where we are with the requirements for the Code of Practice. So we're going to work through what requirements are outstanding by the end of June, and we will report back on the findings to the board at the end of July at the next meeting. Okay, just moving on to employer risk. There are 3 cases listed. This is page 28, page 29. There are 3 cases listed here as high risk, and these are cases where admission agreements and bonds are still outstanding. We are chasing these all. Again, there is a risk that until these are completed, that year-end data won't be in place in time for the posting of the benefit statements. So there is a risk whilst these remain outstanding. There is a 4th case where it's just the signature of admission agreements that is still outstanding. Hopefully this will be resolved soon, but it is still outstanding at the moment. And finally, I was just going to touch on the training that took place for board and committee members recently on the 8th of April. Hopefully that was useful for you. Any feedback welcome. And the next one is scheduled for the 31st of May. That's it from me. If there's any questions, happy to take them.
Thank you for your comprehensive report, Stuart. As always, greatly appreciated. A couple of questions. Do you want to write to the outstanding high risk for the admissions? Just trying to get my head around McLeod. I mean, it's almost becoming a swear word because it just seems to be escalating, you know, rather than there being an end to it. So in your opinion, because there seems to be an impact all the time and whatever, in your opinion, what additional resources, how long will it last until it levels out? I mean, just give us a little bit more of an idea, because after all, we are saying in the recommendation that we are obviously, we will be raising our concerns, and we have been doing that on a regular basis. But to give it some consideration of the workload and performance, and that you need extra resources. But how do you see this? Just talk us around that a little bit more. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So now we're in the business as usual part. It's that we're having to cope with the reality that everything is just more complicated than it used to be. It's kind of similar to when care came in to a degree, because care came in and that was supposed to simplify things, but what it did was just add an extra layer to everything on top of the final salary benefits that stayed in place. So now we've got McLeod on top of this, and the system is generally working reasonably well. It's far from perfect, but it is helpful. But we're still getting to grips with being able to assess when the calculations are correct and when the calculations are incorrect, because it's still an area that is just so complicated for people. Assessing who's affected by it, how much they are affected by it, why they've been affected by it. Is the service correct? Is there other issues? Is it a genuine case? It's just making everything far more complicated. The transfer guidance that has come in, it provides us with answers in terms of how to calculate those transfers, but the systems haven't been updated. So we're having to sit down and figure out this helpful but complex guidance that we've been provided with, and work on these calculations manually. And of course, every time we do work manually, there's additional risks involved in ensuring that the data that the calculations that you're submitting are correct. So everything is taking longer. In terms of how long this will continue for, I mean, I think it's going to go on for some time. Yeah, certainly we've still got to work through the cases in terms of manually updating the records. We've then got to address the retrospective cases as well. Although there are calculations in place for things like retirements and deferred benefits that help us with McLeod calculations, deaths was seen initially by the system providers as an area where you probably won't get too many of these, so we're not going to implement changes for those. So when these cases come along, we're on our own a little bit, really. We're trying just to work these through, and it's frustrating. There's a lot of frustration when people are trying to. People have got a decent amount of work to get through anyway, and when people are having to spend more time on these cases, and it's a pen and paper job, and they're scratching their heads to work out what it is that they should be doing, it just has that knock-on effect on the levels and the standards that we want to reach. We want to hit our performance indicators. We want to do a good job, and we are doing a good job, but there are cases, and there are more cases coming along where things are taking longer. So it just feels like we're at the point now where we should be saying, well, is this something that could be considered? Is additional resource a way of doing it, and whether we add people to the level at the point where the work is done directly, or we bring them in at perhaps a lower level and delegate some areas of the other work that people are doing, freeing up more of the officer's time to do the calculations. I suppose there's a couple of ways that we could address that.
Okay, and a question which I had in my mind when I was reading this, it is actually risk. So as you are doing this manually, and you said officers are scratching their head, and it is a very, very unknown quantity. So obviously, as McLeod becomes or gets legs, so to speak, in some years to come, could we see challenges, and what are you building into the system, not only to avoid challenges, but to deal with challenges, because should they arise? Because I can see that, you know, somebody says, oh, well, you got it wrong. Then what?
Yeah, I mean, calculations, the way that the answers are arrived at, it's all recorded on the record. If someone were to challenge, then we would go back, we would assess it, and we would talk it through. I mean, in general, the difference that the McLeod remedy makes to members' benefits is pretty small. So if there are challenges, it may be, and it is found that we've made a mistake, we will correct that, we will deal with that, but it doesn't fit. It's not a high impact area, Chair. It's not that someone is going to emerge out of the woodwork in 20 years time and we find that we've underpaid them thousands and thousands of pounds. It doesn't feel like it's going to be that. It's all small, which in a way makes it more frustrating, because it still needs to be done. The process has to be worked through. We have to assess who's entitled to it, but yeah, the upshot is that the impact is, on terms of member benefits, is relatively small.
So it's huge cost for little gain. Over to you, Manjit, for your question.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Stuart.
Hi, Manjit.
Just a couple of things. I wanted to ask a question on performance, but I'll come back to that in a minute.
Okay.
You mentioned about the increase that a certain 750 people were impacted for that payment of £5. I guess, you know, £5 is not a lot in the scheme of things, but in these circumstances, I guess that a lot of people face, it probably is, you know, a lot of money to some people. Can you just talk me through the process that when we get an announcement in terms of how much the pensions are going to increase, when that is, when we start then looking to make the changes into the system, and then when people do actually get the full amount of pension? And is it sort of a case of certain people get it before others because their pensions are simpler to calculate? Or
okay,
just a view of that, please. Thank you.
Okay, so it's an annual exercise. The pensions go up from the first Monday on or after the 6th of April each year, in line with the CPI that was recorded in September. Sure. This year's increase is 6.7%. And we would run, so this year has been a bit of an outlier for the reasons that I've mentioned, but typically what happens is that we run all pensions increase at the same time for our pensioners and for our dependent members. Okay. So we update the administration record with this program. So it's been in place for many years. And on the administration side, that works really well. So most members are entitled to a full increase. So this year it's 6.7. If your pension has been in place, it's been in payment, for less than 12 months, and you're someone that's retired from active, you may not be entitled to the full increase for that first year. So it's a pro rata, depending on whereabouts you're retired. So in addition to that, these members that retired in the final 12 months, where they've retired as opposed to having a deferred benefit brought into payment, they're also entitled to a slight increase on the value of their care pension. So the care pension that came in, that took effect from the 1st of April 14, began accruing from the 1st of April 14, that gets revalued each year. And because the members retired halfway through the year, the care pension that built up to the date of leaving didn't reach the 31st of March and the 1st of April 2024. So it wasn't revalued until the pensions increase exercise. So these members, this group of members, which we think there's about 750 of, in addition to their increase, their part year increase from the 8th of April, were also entitled to this minor increase from the 1st of April. And the way the system has or hasn't worked this year means that it's not been included for those first 7 days. That partial increase has been included from the 8th along with the main increase, but it hasn't been included from the 1st to the 7th.
Sorry, Stu, can I just say, is it the 8th of April when everybody then gets the pension, the full payment?
That's PI date. Yeah, that's the standard pensions increase date. But there are other categories of members where they'll have a pension increase that's payable from the 1st.
Yeah. When do they actually? So when do they actually get it? I mean, as a target, when do we have a target to put it into their bank accounts, so to speak? If it's on the 8th of April, when is it going?
Well, the pensions are paid in arrears, so they'll get it in the 8th of in the 30th of April.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Just on the performance side of things, I think my question sort of links into what the chair was asking as well. The performance of McLeod and other sort of impacts on your resourcing is affecting performance, and it seems as though it's going to carry on doing that for a while. My question was the same as similar to what the chair asked in terms of resourcing. I know at the last meeting, I think one of your colleagues said we built that into the budgets that we think we need. I mean, you're gonna have to review that again fairly quickly then to look at how to minimize the impact on your performance, and then performance obviously means people not getting the responses or things done for them as quickly as we'd like to get them done. Is that something that we're gonna have to look at again now then with these issues that have been raised?
Manjit, I think Ian wants to come in here, so sure. I'll defer to him.
Sure, no worries.
Morning, Manjit.
Hi, Ian.
Can you see me? Is my camera working okay there?
I can't see it though.
No, but we can hear you.
I don't know what's happened to my camera.
Never mind.
Sorry, but I am here, I can assure you. Sorry about that, folks. In terms of the budget, Manjit, you raise a very good point. When I was looking at the budget for 24-25, I have scoped in some contingency, Manjit, for McLeod, I will be honest. I hadn't at the point of, well, as of now, I hadn't clarified really what we needed in terms of additional resource, Manjit, for the reasons Stuart said, because it's in multiple areas. It's deaths, it's transfers, and various other areas. But principally, I have scoped in additional resource for McLeod if required, and it feels as though it is required. I think if the board are in support, and obviously would have to go to committee, we would obviously make that recommendation for additional sort of temporary resource, and then it would be for us to then determine where best we use that in terms of actually helping to manoeuvre through some of this.
Yeah, no, that's a fair comment. I think from what you're saying, and I get the vibe that probably has to be done, and I'm sure I'm supportive. I'm sure the board would probably be as well, because I think the other thing I just wanted to pick up on was that I think you mentioned, Stuart mentioned earlier on that there was some task, I can't remember which one it was, but you mentioned that more officers were going to be trained and allocated to a priority. Does that mean then that there's an impact on other lesser priorities because you reallocated staff having trained them to a higher priority? I mean, it's all linked to the resourcing. In
some areas, Manjit, there's competing pressures. It's tricky because McLeod is obviously in business as usual, so it's impacting on all areas, but we've got to be very mindful of the valuation is not that far ahead as well. So things like the aggregations and preserved benefits that Stuart mentioned earlier as well are important in terms of the valuation ultimately, but equally those members' benefits, although they're not obviously pressing because they're not immediate like a retirement or a death would be. So it's conflicting pressures, Manjit, is the honest position here, and it's trying to keep all those plates spinning whilst under pressure in multiple different areas now, to be truthful.
Yeah, no,
does that help? I know that's probably not a very clear answer, but I think it demonstrates that it's multiple positions, really.
I think just incrementally over the last couple of meetings, I'm just getting the feeling that things are, teams are doing a fantastic job, don't get me wrong, but there is pressure building up. And I think it's just recognizing that and then saying, okay, we need to do X, Y, and Z to address that. Not that you're not already doing it, but just sort of, if there's more resources you need, can you make a justification for that, which I'm sure you can. And just one other point I just wanted to raise.
Manjit, I think Simone wants to come in on this point. If you can hold your last point. Simone, sure, do you want to come in on this?
Thank you, Chair. Ian's partly covered what I was going to add anyway, to be honest, but I think it was just worth emphasising the point around the resources and that we are monitoring the position very closely, and we are reviewing some of the resources, and actually we're recruiting some new apprenticeships, hopefully, which, whilst that won't necessarily be focused just on McLeod, it will help with the general workload situation. And then I just wanted to link back into kind of the general customer feedback and complaints picture as well, because although we have got, it is a growing backlog, actually the customer feedback and complaints is still fairly stable, and the number of complaints we're getting is fairly low. And I think that's because the area where the backlog is the greatest is those areas that don't have an immediate impact on members, like they're preserved in the aggregation. So I think it's just worth kind of that wider context that yes, we are monitoring it, and we're monitoring it very closely. And Ian and I discussed it yesterday about where is that tipping point where we know we are going to have to do something different on this, but then we are looking at all that data and thinking, well, actually, because of the areas where the backlog is, it isn't having that immediate impact on members at the moment, and it's just balancing that and spinning the plates, as Ian just referred to.
Yeah, I think as long as I'm sure you recognise what the impact is of spinning those various plates, and making sure the others don't drop off there. One just as a suggestion, and probably you already do this because I know Ian does a fantastic job. I guess other authorities in a similar situation to ours, and is there sharing of best practice in terms of how to overcome some of these general common issues, and there might be only a few, but also maybe perhaps looking at, I don't know, partnering each other if they've got, I don't suppose anybody's got spare resource, but where they have dips in their resourcing and they can help our authority going forward. Just an off the sort of top of my head comment suggestion, Ian. That's all, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Manjit. Well, I should think, as I understand, we've got quite a low amount. There might be other authorities that have more people affected by McLeod. But Stuart, do you want to answer that?
We're in regular contact with our East Midlands colleagues in particular, and whilst I'll take Manjit's suggestion on board, we are regularly talking about how to approach these things, particularly around the transfer guidance, for example. To use a recent example, we're working through how best to make these work. Yeah.
Yes, to note that we are one of the best performing authorities, so I should think we are probably ahead of the curve. Okay, Manjit, does that complete your questions?
It does, Chair. Thank you very much. And I just recognise, I think the team are doing a fantastic job. It's just, thank you for that. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, so I see no other hands up on your report. So as always, thank you very much. Now to the members, if you note on page 32.76 is a recommendation. Now, Stuart, it also talks about raising other concerns. When you are reporting to the committee, do I assume that you put the point of McLeod forward and the need for your resources in very uncertain terms? Will you be raising Haywood and the posting of the benefit statements as well, so they're aware of that? I assume you will say yes to this because you always do, but just to ask, because we are actually putting forward a recommendation, so therefore we need to have on record what we're recommending.
Okay. Yes, Chair. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, as there is a recommendation attached to this report, can I see a show of hands before we move on to the next report? Or a quick, just a yes will do?
Yes.
Okay, that's Manjit, Richard.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. That is noted. Thank you very much, Stuart, and very much appreciated. So we are moving to the next report, which is our report on page 43 to 54. And that is the internal audit arrangement, including the audit work 23-24 and the plan 24-25. Now, may I welcome, good morning, Neil Jones, who is the head of our audit and assurance, who is with us today. There is an appendix on page 49 onwards, and there's also a recommendation to this report. But meanwhile, over to you, Neil, to introduce your report. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks, Chair. I thought I was going to be with everybody in person, not on Teams, but hey ho, here we are now. So, unfortunately, Neera Patel, who's the audit manager who oversees the pension fund audit, she can't be with us today, so I'll present her report. I may croak a little bit as I'm going through, so I'll take some water on as I'm going through. But the purpose of this report is to explain how internal audit is arranged for the pension fund and to provide a progress update on the work completed, and then also the plan for this current financial year's audits. So the background section of the report, which is page 43 and paragraphs 2 to 5, explains the requirements for effective governance and proper administration of financial affairs, and included the need to have a continuous internal audit. And this board, the local pension board, has responsibility for receiving the plans and the results of internal audit activity. The next section at the top of page 44, which is paragraphs 6 to 10, explains in more detail how my team works to internal audit standards, how it plans audits and reports findings and recommendations. Paragraph 11 begins to explain information on the work that we've conducted in the last financial year, and that is further outlined in Appendix 1, which is on pages 49 and 50. So once again, it's very pleasing to report an overall positive position. Certainly no high importance recommendations which need to be left in the committee's domain to see them through. So very successful year again with the audits. I think Stuart touched on that as well earlier on. The report itself does, paragraph 11, just gives a little tease out of a few examples of recommendations that have been made and accepted. We did have to defer 3 audits from this year's plan. From the previous year's plan. That was due to the national delays in moving things forward. But we did agree at one alternative replacement. And of course, what we always do is we share our final reports with the external auditor, who are Grant Thornton, to enable them to inform their risk assessment when they do the audit of the pension fund accounts. Paragraph 12 of the report throws some light on the biennial National Fraud Initiative exercise, which is a counter-fraud data matching exercise. So data that had been uploaded in October 22 eventually turned out in reports produced and released in January 23. And those reports identified 4 cases of continuing payments to deceased pensioners, of which 3 are still being pursued. Following on from the NFI work, the service also subscribes to a mortality screening service. That's done on a 6-monthly basis. So this is in paragraphs 13 to 15, and this enables a screening against the Department for Work and Pensions deceased persons database. And what this exercise actually does, rather than the biennial National Fraud Initiative, is it enables the service to become aware of deaths at an earlier stage in the process, and therefore the risk of continuing overpayments is lessened. So the actual service that has been subscribed to has been expanded, and it was run twice in the year, both in June and November. And again, it identified early cases, 6 in total, where payments had continued for deceased persons. Excuse me. 2 of which, again, were able to be recouped quickly, and the other 4 are being chased. I'm going to take some water. Thank you. Paragraph 16. I know there's a paper on following me on the agenda about the risk register. So we do. Paragraph 16 explains how we, as an internal audit service, get the opportunity to review that, and we place reliance on that as part of our annual planning process. I'll come on to that in a moment. Paragraph 17 explains that, and I'll touch on this earlier on, that we also do audits collaboratively with the partner groups of the LGPS Central. So a revised 4-year internal plan was started in 23-24, and what happens is those audits are allocated around the individual partner heads of audit. That cyclical programme is shown in Appendix 2, which is shown on pages 51 and 52. Leicester County Council will be asked to complete an audit in 24-25, so we didn't do one in 23-24. So then that audit will be governance focused. What I have noticed from this report is I need to find out what assurances we got on those audits that the other partners, the 2 audits that the other partners undertook. So I'll probably let the board know what the results were on those. Paragraphs 18 to 21 are quite important to bring to the board's attention now, because they explain that as part of the annual work by the LGPS Central external auditors, who are Deloitte's, their what they call an annual Type 1 control report had been delayed, and it was actually qualified. So LGPS Central asked for all of the partner external auditors, and for Leicestershire, that's Grant Thornton, along with the Section 151 officers, to agree a sort of short-term approach to get things back on track with the annual reporting. Grant Thornton, in discussion, I know, with Simone on this, and so Grant Thornton, along with other external auditors and other Section 151, did actually opt for a Type 2 report. And one of the bases on that was they'd get more assurance, and it would alleviate them from undertaking significant extra work and the fund incurring any additional costs. However, despite this, paragraph 20 explains that the LGPS Central Audit Risk and Compliance Committee and its board has decided to go with a Type 1 type report, and they will get some other forms of assurance and agree those with external auditors like Grant Thornton. The table at page 47 gives a very brief summary of performance during the year. Apologies for the alignment of some of the font. 3 audits have been deferred into this current financial year, and then they're purely due to delays in developments nationally. Recharge for the fund was just under £30,000 for that work. The second appendix on pages 53 and 54 now outlines a planned internal audit work for the current year that we've just started, 2024-25. How the plan is compiled in terms of meetings with the directors and also looking at the risk register is covered in paragraphs 24 to 26. And that's going to be a planned audit of 87 days over the year, and that will bring in the region of £34,000. That brings me to the end of the report. The recommendation is for the board to note the report, and I'm happy to take any questions. But Chair, I've just had a flash to say that my battery's running low, so I'm just going to go off camera, if you don't mind, for a minute and plug my laptop in. It's not been the best of days so far, so I'll be back in about 5 seconds.
Okay, thank you. Okay, has anybody got any questions on this? I did notice that there are no hands up, so I assume everybody is very happy with the audit report, the result, and agreeing the 87 days of internal audit work. And are we all in agreement to save poor old Neil's voice and wish him well.
Yes, yes indeed.
I was going to ask, but I won't because I'm sure it's not relevant, what the noughts and crosses mean, because but I'm not going to. No, unless you want to.
Yeah, that appendix 2 is just how the audits amongst the 8 partners of the LGPS are to be divvied up and allocated. So across means that if you look at the first line, 23-24 governance, the tick is against the West Midlands. So the West Midlands Internal Audit Service will do the audit there, but all the others have crosses. Whereas in the next next line investment, Staffordshire County Council has done that one, but all the others. But then the AAF report, everybody has the opportunity to look at that. So
I couldn't quite figure out. Well, we've got a lot of noughts and crosses, and then very shortly on page 53 on investments, it says to be confirmed. I know 12 days are booked down to that, but what are you actually looking at, and what are we confirming?
No, to be confirmed means we're going to review where the risk really lies in terms of that audit. We'll look at the risk register, we'll talk with Bulesh and Simone, and then agree an audit that's going to go. So for the purposes of this report, we just wanted to know that there will be an audit in the framework of investments, but we'll deliver more information on it once it's agreed.
Thank you so much, and I hope you get better soon. There are no hands up, so I take this report as noted, attached with the recommendation, and that completes this item. Thank you, Neil.
Thank you
very much.
Cheers, bye.
Bye-bye. Right, so now we are on our agenda, item 8, and that is the risk management and internal control, page 55 to 66, for us to note the report. And it's over to Ian, who found his camera, and there he is. Good. Yeah, it is still good morning, Ian. And we are to note and be informed by Ian again. Thank you. Over to you, Ian.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies that I couldn't get my camera to work. I lost all my connections, and some of my ports have stopped working on my laptop. So I think I need to talk to our IT colleagues after this meeting. So apologies for that. This report is the risk register for the fund. So that includes the investments and the administration. It's the report that goes to both board and committee to each of the meetings. There are 19 risks split into 6 different areas, the areas being investment, liability, employers, governance, operational and regulatory. Each risk is scored based on the likelihood of a risk occurring and the impact and the likelihood, and that generates the score for the risk. This latest risk register was taken to committee on the 8th of March. So it's a recent version. There have been no changes to any of the scores on the risk register since the report that was taken in March, but there have been a few very minor changes just to make the board aware. Risks 6, 7 and 12 on the risk register. The risks have been changed from following discussion with internal audit as well, actually following the point that Neil's just been talking about, from treat to tolerate. So we've kind of recognised that we've taken these risks really as low as we can. So we're now tolerating the risks. The risks on all of these 3 are low. So we feel that we're fairly comfortable with these. We'll continue to monitor them as things progress, but we don't anticipate any significant changes to these. The only other one is risk 14, which is where there's an immediate payment that's not applied correctly, or if there's human error in calculating a pension, scheme member's pension or one-off payment could be wrong. What we have a verification system that verifies the bank account. This has now been expanded to include all pensions and transfers. So we've just expanded that element of verification to a wider area. So we wanted to make that point in the risk register just to show that we're expanding it wherever we can, but just to try and mitigate risk as much as we possibly can. That is all I actually planned on saying, Chair, but happy to take any questions.
Right, are there any questions? And again, I can see no hands up. You must be doing a wonderful job. There is nothing.
Okay, lovely. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you very much. Very much appreciated. Right, now, that completes agenda item 8. And we are to note the report, which we've did unanimously, and we are going over to agenda item 9 now on your pages 67 to 80. And that is Kat, I keep forgetting your title, Kat. It is analyst of whatever. Anyway, I will think about it in a minute. Over to you, Kat. Thank you. Good morning.
Morning, members. So the purpose of this report is to seek the views of the board on the draft training policy in advance of it being presented to the committee, as well as note the training plan for 2024, and they're appended at Appendix A and Appendix B. So this policy is a review of the same policy that was approved in 2022. Training policy is required for a number of reasons. Obviously, legislation sets that board members have a personal responsibility to have an appropriate level of knowledge and understanding for the purposes of enabling you to exercise properly your functions as members of the board. We also note that government have looked to put in place guidance that probably extend that to the committee. Currently, they've not been covered by legislation. And we know that good governance is essential for the pension scheme to be successful. So there's a clear link between good governance, good fund performance and training. So taking into account all of those factors, we've undertook a review of the training policy, having regard to the legislation, relevant guidance, such as the pensions regulator, as well as the fund's terms of reference and what other pension funds are doing and best practice in this area. We've also considered the views of committee and board. So you'll remember in earlier this year, we brought training needs analysis assessments, and you fed back kind of your views on how training is currently going, and we saw kind of knowledge levels across the committee and board. Out of those conversations, obviously, we're aware that pressures on members already, and we don't want to set unreasonable expectations, and we know we don't want to make it difficult for members to serve on the committee or board. We know you're not expected to be technical experts, and that levels of knowledge vary depending on experience. It's also acknowledged that it's also recognised that some members have been on the committee or board for a number of years, and so have built up a good level of knowledge over that time. Ultimately, we need to demonstrate that the committee and board possess the expertise, experience and knowledge required to be capable of serving on the committee and board. And we consider that the Hyman's Aspire training is an accepted way to provide such assurance in the first instance by providing a board level understanding on the key issues and topics relevant to members. So on Appendix A, the main features of the original training policy are retained, so objectives, areas of training and the methods of training. The broad changes are more to provide more detail and clarity on the expectations of members and officers, and how we can measure success against the policy. So I've just set out a few points of kind of key changes, but ultimately, I think subject to comments from the board and the committee. We're looking to get this policy approved at the next committee, which I believe is in June. And it's just to highlight from the comments that were made at last board, we've kind of recognised the need for flexibility. So we obviously had the trial at the end of the February board meeting, and now we've had the first in-person session on the 8th of April, where we had 10 members attend alongside fund officers, and I think that was quite successful in terms of kind of allowed for debate and questions with officers. And we're kind of going to keep those sessions going ahead. So Appendix B sets out the next dates for the meetings ahead, but I'll probably just leave it there for any comments or questions on the policy.
Right. Okay. Investment analyst. There you go. I knew it would come back. Thank you, Kat. So I assume the next training session, did you say, was the 31st of March for all members, wasn't it, to attend? Well, but we will send, no doubt, notification around. Now, one of the things which I've noted hasn't been really referred to on carrying on to kind of working it on a hybrid model, attendance and by by teams. Is that something you are still looking at to promote? Because if you are, well, the modules are very, very long. We're talking some of them going forward are 3 hours. So, for instance, that 3-hour module would take a whole day by the time I'm driving, and it's only my personal example, but by the time I'm driving to County Hall, coming back, that is a day out. If I'm having a team session, that means I can go to another meeting at Harborough because I'm in the middle. So it doesn't take a whole day out. So what is your comment on sort of trying to perfect the hybrid model? My other comment is, which I have mentioned before, it is the term of the committees, because they do not run alongside members, if you see what I mean. Members change in May, and they will do next time round, but the committee and the chair, it is prior to that, if you see what I mean. So if you're voted as a chair and then, lose your, then in May, you have to make arrangements to deal with that. So that is number 2. And one thing I can't get my head around, yes, it's all in relation to government guidance, and it sets out what the board and the committee have got to do. But is there a particular emphasis that members have to be part of the board and the committee? Or are we just talking committee members in general? Do you see what I'm trying to say? Is there a balance that has to be addressed, that you have to have a member or not on the board and the committee? Anyway, there are my questions. Try, if not, okay. It doesn't matter.
Yes, I might have to come back on the last one and kind of.
Okay.
But yeah, first point, on the hybrids, it's difficult because after the last meeting, we tried to do it all via Teams and have the modules playing, and it just didn't seem to work because of the internet and like the bandwidth. And I think we'd have the exact same problem if we were in the room and then people were joining on Microsoft Teams.
Yeah.
So that's the only issue. I recognise that some of the in-person sessions we've kind of booked in 3 hours. That's more just so we can kind of fit in as much as possible at that time, so you don't have to kind of come into County Hall 8 times rather than 4 times. If you look at the modules, I suppose at home, if you're unable to attend, or other commitments, then you can split the modules into far smaller chunks. So you don't have to undertake them in one fell swoop. You can kind of fit them into when your calendar allows, and that's why we've kind of set, trying to keep all members kind of on the same track in terms of, if we have the training in April, then members should complete those same modules by the end of April, and that hopefully gives enough time to kind of dig into the modules. On the point about the chair, I know Angie's looking at the terms of reference for the board, so perhaps that's something that will come back to the board through Angie and Democratic Services. And on the last point, you might just have to
it's all right, we can have a word offline about that. So there is a hand up, but it hasn't got a name to it, so please speak up. Oh, it's Andrew. Hello. And you are on mute, Andrew. Hello.
Would help it. There's always one. So what I would say is that, hello, my name's Andrew Stewart. I'm the head of People Services, but I'm also here as a representative for employees. I just wanted to feed back in terms of it. I did the Hyman's training, and that took me 11 hours just doing the modules themselves in terms of what it said on the time counter that it took me to do it. So I think that the schedule of activities does give enough time in terms of 11 hours, and it does split it quite nicely. I think that the bit that I've missed in maybe doing it online was that localization to Leicestershire, because it gave it very high level, and it gave it about this is the way it should be as part of it, which was really good. And what I'm now doing is trying to localize it to the Leicestershire knowledge. So I think there's something about, if you do the Hyman's training all online, there is something about where can you go to ask those questions. And I know I've been speaking with Ian about those kind of things, but that's just a little bit of maybe in terms of the policy is about the time commitment it's going to take to actually get you up to speed, just to be clear of the expectations. And then something around localizing, if you do the online training in terms of the hybrid stuff, how do you localize your knowledge to Leicestershire? Those are other than just attending the meetings and getting yourself up to speed. So that's just some feedback. It's not anything based on my experience of using the system.
First of all, Andrew, my sincere apologies. I should have welcomed you to the meeting. So welcome, and thank you very much for the input. That's really good to know. However, it appears to me that you are very good with technology. I'm a Luddite. So for me, it is extremely difficult, and I keep forgetting to save and whatever else. And whilst most people, or previously, some of them can do it during their working hours. You see, with us, we're all over the place. I've still got a module outstanding. I'm about to, I was going to do it this afternoon. However, I've got to go and attend another meeting now. So, it is really, really difficult. The other thing is, from your perspective, as you are an employee, right, most employees have got an interest because pension are integral to, them. For members, maybe one or two have still got a small pension, but going forward, I think within the next term, they will have no interest. There is no affiliation because members do not get a pension. They're not. So it will go straight over the head. So it is very, very difficult, I assume, for CAT to balance all of this. But, that is why you are here to put forward your kind of aspect, and it's really, really welcome. But it's also, to see if members, what we can do for pension fund members. Anyway, is there anything else you can add from your experience for CAT to feed in?
No, I welcome. I'm very I do use technology. I think it was just to relay my experience of the Hyman online training modules, and it does take quite a lot of commitment to keep on reminding yourself to go back to it. But it is achievable and it is doable. It just took me 11 hours in terms of total time taken. So it's just to feed that back into the expectations is really what I'm trying to get across.
Yeah. Yes, and I'm kind of fearful that going forward we may not get enough members on this committee to volunteer if they're having to make that commitment. But anyway, can I thank you again, Andrew, and welcome, and we'll see you no doubt at the next meeting now. No other hands up, nothing from anybody else, Kat. And that is it then, Kat. Thank you very much. So
thank you.
Thank you. So we note the report and we note the recommendation, which is on page, well, it is point 18 on page 69. Thank you very much, Kat, and we'll see you soon. Thank you. And that brings us to the date of the next meeting, which is the 31st of July at 10 a.m. here on Teams again. There are no other items which are urgent. Richard's got his hand up, so I'll go over to Richard in a minute before I will ask, are we staying online once we're off for further training, Ian?
No, Chair, that's no further training today.
Okay, so Richard.
Thank you. That was going to be my question. No more training today. Thank you. That question's already been answered. Thank you.
Okay. Righty-ho then. Thank you very much. And Angie, any possibility that we separately circulate the training policy as probably with a little link to the members of this committee, so nobody will say eventually that it is forgotten, so they've got it as a reference. Do you think that's a good idea? Yeah. Righty-ho then. Thanks to Angie. Thanks to all of the officers. Thank you to everybody else, and see you on the 31st of July. And I always love to see Anthony smiling. Now he isn't working. Thank you all. Have a lovely day.
Cheers all.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.